In this video, we are going to go through Azure Virtual Desktop Complete Hands-on Lab. So we will go through all the possible scenarios you as an administrator will encounter in an Azure Virtual Desktop deployment. This hands-on lab exercise will teach you how to create a session host, publish your application not only using Start menu, using MSIX app attach as well. We will learn how to connect to Azure Virtual Desktop session host using browser and using an app on both Windows and Mac operating systems. We will set up the FSLogix profile and we will learn two different types of load balancers. One is breadth first and second one is depth first. Then we will learn about how you can configure MFA for your Azure Virtual Desktops. We will finish off this practical exercise by giving you tips on monitoring your Azure Virtual Desktop environment, how to cost optimize your environment, and giving you hands-on practical exercise on how you can configure your Microsoft Teams on an Azure Virtual Desktop environment. So without wasting any more time, let's get into it. In the first lab, we are going to create host pool using Getting Started Wizard. So let's jump right in. I'm on my Azure portal. You can go to the global search box and type in Azure Virtual Desktop and select that. So this is the Getting Started Wizard. You can use this create a host method to create your first host pool. This is where your pooled desktops are gonna reside. Pooled desktop are a set of computer or host which operate on a as needed basis. In a pooled configuration, we will be hosting multiple non-persistent sessions with no user profile information stored locally. This is where FSLogix profile containers provide the user profile to the host dynamically. This provides the ability for an organization to fully utilize the compute resources on a single host. We are going to deploy this AVD host pool in an already deployed Azure Active Directory domain services instance. So what I have done, I have created a new resource group called AVD resource group. And within that, I've already deployed something called Azure Active Directory Domain Services. So let's assume a scenario where our company is known as Contuso and Contuso is already using Azure AD Domain Services. And this Azure Active Directory Domain Services will provide identity and authorization services. So let's go back to home, click on Azure Virtual Desktop or search for Azure Virtual Desktop and click on Getting Started. Here, click on Start. First, if you have multiple subscription, make sure you select the right one. Under the identity provider, we're going to select an existing Active Directory because we have already deployed Azure AD Domain Services. Under identity service, because we have AADDS, I'm going to select AADDS, or you can select Active Directory as well. Under resource group, give a name for your resource group. I'm going to call it AVD host pool resource group. Location, this is where you would be ideally picking a closest location to your user or where they are using from. If I go to another tab and go to resource group, let's click on the AVD resource group. All of my resources are hosted in West US. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and change the location to West US because I want all of my resources are there in the same region. Under virtual network, I'm going to select my AADDS virtual network because when I created this AADDS, so if I go back to my other Azure portal, this resource group already have the resources, things like AADDS, we already have a VNet created. So the VNet is on the address space of 10.0.0.0/16 and we have a subnet. First subnet is AADDS subnet and then we created a new subnet for the host file. So that is the session host subnet. So you can add new subnets and create different subnets by going into this networking subnet page. So if you have any questions related to the networking, I have created another hands-on lab on Azure networking. So please do go and watch that. So there I clearly explain how you can create your first VNet, subnets, etc. So let me go back to my other portal. Alright, so we selected the location, we selected the VNet and subnet. Under subnet, I'm going to select the session host subnet because that's where I want all of my host machines to be available. Under Azure admin username, give the username and password for the user. For the domain administrator, and give the username and password. The next step is to go to virtual machines. Under virtual machine, the first step is to select whether do you want this instance for multiple user or a single user. I'm going to select multiple user. Under image type, expand this and select gallery. Under image, select, I'm going to scroll down and select Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session with Microsoft 365 apps. So I'm going to select Windows 10 Multi-Session 20H2 with Microsoft 365 apps Gen 2. The next option is to select the virtual machine size. This is where you're going to configure what compute you want to allocate for your host machines. So you can either go with the default D2S V3. I'm going to click on change size. I'm going to search for D4S V4. This would give me 4 vCPUs and 16 GB RAM. So select that and click on select. So our host pool virtual machine size is being changed. The next step is to provide the name prefix for your session host. This has to be a unique name within the resource group. So I'm going to call it AVD host pool 1 session host. Provide the number of virtual machines you want at the beginning. So I'm going to add 2. If you want to link to an Azure template, you can do that. I'm going to uncheck it. Next, click on assignments. If you do want to create a test user account, you can do that. I'm going to uncheck it. We don't want that. And we do want to assign existing users or groups. So I'm going to leave it at the default, which is checkboxed. And click on review and create. This goes through a validation process. After you get this validation passed message, click on create. This will kick off a deployment process. So you can keep an eye on this notification tab, or you can stay at this particular page, which gives you very detailed information about what's happening in the background. Each of these items will be listed here like this. So this would ideally take up to 10 to 20 minutes, depending upon the type of configuration what you have put in. So I'm going to pause the video. We will come back after completing the deployment. Alright, so our deployment is completed. So you can click on this notification tab. This tells you the deployment is succeeded or not. In case if your deployment fails at this stage, all you have to do is go delete the resource group you created and just follow the steps which I taught you in the first lab. So we can either click on go to resource from here, or we can click on go to resource from here. You can check all the deployment, what happened in the backend by going into this particular page. So when I started the deployment, it was 9:30 p.m. Now it is 10. So it took me around 30 minutes to complete this whole deployment. So let me go back to go to resource. So I'm going to click on next steps and click on go to resource. Here, if you notice, we can see that we have 2 virtual machines running. These 2 are the session hosts we created. So let's click on this virtual machines. You can see there are 2 session hosts we created. These 2 are the virtual machines. Now if I go back, apart from that, what else is created? So if you scroll down, you would be able to see there is one application group. So click on application group. We have one application group created, and we have one application as well. So that is the session desktop. So we will come to these topics later. Now in the next lab, what we're going to do is we're going to do monitoring using log analytics. So let's assume your company is interested in setting up an operations center focused on monitoring the host pool, user access, and many more. So to help achieve that goal, you can create a log analytics workspace and map it to the AVD environment using Azure Insights. Let's go and create our log analytics workspace. So go back to your Azure portal. I'm going to go back to my home page. Click on create a resource. Here, search for log analytics workspace and select log analytics workspace. Within this page, click on create. Again, we will go through this setup wizard. Make sure you select the right subscription. So under resource group, select AVD host pool resource group we created to deploy the session host. Give a name for your instance. I'm going to call it AVD monitoring log analytics and a random number because it has to be unique. And the region, again, you can pick any region, but because for our lab, all the resources are deployed in West US, I'm going to select West US and simply click on review and create. And this window helps you verify if the parameters we filled are correct. And after you get the validation passed message, click on create. This will initiate the deployment. This deployment wouldn't take more than 3 minutes. So let's wait for this deployment to complete. Alright, so our deployment is completed. Click on Go to Resource to see the newly created Log Analytics workspace. Now that we have created our Log Analytics workspace, the next task is to enable diagnostics for our workspace. So let's go and do that. So I'm going to go back to my Azure homepage. Click on Azure Virtual Desktop. On the left hand side, under Monitoring, click on Insights. So here, let's select our subscription where our resources are placed, and pick the host pool and the time range, because we just now created, so the time range doesn't matter. So I just gonna leave it at 48 hours. And if you scroll down, you would be able to see Open Configuration Workbook. So click on Open Configuration Workbook. So in the check configuration page, under Resource Diagnostic Settings, click on this drop down box and select the AVD monitoring workspace we created. And again, scroll down to the bottom of this page and click on Configure Host Pool. On the Deploy template, the diagnosis setting for the host pool are automated using a template. So you can go through these configuration categories. Workspace will be configured for management activities, feeds, connections, errors, checkpoints, host registration, and agent health status. After reviewing, click on Deploy. So right now the template is deploying. The deployment is completed. Now I'm going to quickly refresh this page. Now on the same page, you would be able to see the settings applied to the host pool. Now to configure the workspace, again scroll down to the bottom of the page and click on Configure Workspace. So when you deploy this template, the workspace is going to configure the management activities, feeds, errors, and checkpoints. So click on Deploy. Alright, so that is completed. So I'm going to hit refresh one more time. This time we would be able to see the following settings under the workspace. So now on the check configuration page, this time click on Session Host Data Settings. Under Workspace, select the workspace we created and scroll down to the bottom and add the session host to the workspace. So click on Add Host to Workspace and you can read the message. It says that Azure will configure the host machines to send data to the selected workspace, and click on Deploy. Now the session host will be added to the Log Analytics workspace. The deployment is in progress. This is going to take a little more time than the other deployments. Alright, so that deployment is also completed. I'm going to cancel this, hit on refresh one more time. You can see that the session host is added. Now it is asking for performance counter information. Do you want performance counters? If you want, you can configure these performance counters. So I do want these information because this gives me information about the memory, disk space, the CPU utilization, things like that. It's very important for me. So click on Configure Performance Counter and apply configuration. Now this configuration is also added to the Log Analytics workspace. So I'm going to quickly refresh one more time and let's go and select our workspace. Now if you scroll down, you can see all the performance counters we just now configured. The data is being just gathered because we just now deployed. We can come back to this page later to see the metrics on how these performance counters are being measured. The next task is Windows event logs. To configure that, scroll down to the events page and on the right hand side you can see the types of event logs would be generated or created. So right now I don't have that information, so click on Configure Events to deploy this template to gather the Windows event logs. Alright, so now we will be able to gather the event logs from all of our session hosts. Now let's go back. All of our deployment for these Log Analytics is completed. You can just follow these steps by yourself to enable monitoring using Log Analytics for your Azure Virtual Desktop environment. So that completed the lab 2, which was monitoring using Log Analytics. We will come back to the monitoring data after going through a few other steps. In the third lab, we are going to learn how to create application groups and assign them to users. So let's assume a scenario where your company wants to restrict the access to applications used by different teams in your organization. So your company wants to create a separate application group and assign only a specific set of users to it. So I'm going to show you an example of how you can help your company to configure and create an application group and add applications to it. So let's go and create our application group. Let's go back to the Azure homepage. Click on Azure Virtual Desktop and under Manage, click on Application Groups. As you can see that there is already an application group created. When we created the session host in the first lab exercise, this was created by default. In this task, what we are going to do is we are going to create a new application group. This time the type would be RemoteApp, and we will publish 2 applications in it. And also we are going to assign users to both the application groups. So let's go and create our first group. So select the already created application group. Under Manage, click on Assignments. Here on top of the page, click on Add. Here I'm searching for the user which I want to assign it to. Select the user and click on Select. So now we have added one additional user to this application group, which is the desktop application group. Now we are going to create a new application group called RemoteApp application group. So for that, I'm going to go back to the application group page. Go back to your Azure Virtual Desktop. Under Manage, click on Application Groups. On top of the page, click on Create. Select the right subscription. Under Resource Group, we have to select the host pool resource group. That's where we deployed everything. So click on AVD host pool resource group. Under host pool, I'm going to select the default host pool, which is AVD host pool. The location is grayed out because everything is deployed in West US, so we won't be able to change it. Scroll down until you find application group type. Here, instead of desktop, we're going to retain RemoteApp and give a name for your application group. I'm going to call AVD application group 01 and click next for applications. This is where we would be able to add application to this application group. If you forget to add application here or you decide to do application later, you can always do this at the later stage by going into the Azure Virtual Desktop Getting Started page. So click on Add Applications. The application source, I'm going to retain Start menu. We will come back to MSIX package and file path later. Under Application, I'm going to pick Excel because these are the application which is already available in my session host. Display name, you can retain whatever you want. I'm going to retain it as Excel itself. Application path and icon path are default. So if you do install your own application, and then you can modify these values. And after that, click on Save. Now let's add one more application. So click on Add Application. This time I'm going to select, scroll down until you find Word. So select Word. Display name, I'm going to leave it at default. I'm not changing any other value. Hit on Save. Now we have 2 applications added. Next, let's go to Assignments. So click on Assignments. By default, this is not added to any users. So you can click on Add Azure AD users or groups. In the real world scenario, I would highly encourage you to add groups rather than users. Right now, I'm going to assign it to myself. So click on Select. And next, let's go to Workspace. Under Workspaces tab, click on Register Application Group. Instead of No, select Yes. And we are going to register to our existing application group we created. Go to Advanced tab. If you do want to enable boot diagnostic settings, we can enable that. We are not going to do that because we have already set up the log analytics workspace for all monitoring. So hit on Review and Create. This goes through a validation process. After you get the validation pass message, click on Create. This would take about a minute to complete the deployment. Alright, so our deployment is completed. So click on Go to Resource. And what we have done is we created a couple of application groups. So click on Applications. Here you can see the newly added 2 applications. And if you want to see the assignments, you can click on Assignments. You can see the user who you assigned this application groups and applications to. So that's the end of Lab 3, where we learned about creating application groups and assigning them to users. In the Lab 4, we're going to learn about how to access the publish application and desktop using a browser scenario. So let's assume a scenario where your company wants their AVD environment to be flexible in terms of accessing the sessions by their employees. So in this exercise, I will help you understand how you can test and access the AVD session using a browser. The first task what we're going to perform is we're going to access the published application. So let's go and do that. So the first step is we are going to go to another tab, and this time go to a portal called aka.ms/wvdarmweb and hit enter. Because I have logged into this portal using the same username and password, I have already automatically logged in and I can see the published application for that particular user. In your case, if you are using a new browser without any logon session, you would have to log in with the username and password. To access the published application, all you have to do is double click. This will give you an option to allow any local resources. So if you want to use the clipboard, microphone, printer, you can enable or disable that and click on allow. For the first time, it is going to ask you for the username and password for the user. So I'm going to provide the username and password. I don't want to save it. And let me quickly minimize the size of the window. I'm going to change it to 150. So right now what it is happening in the background is it is setting up our application for the first time. So the first time it would take some time, maybe a few extra seconds to launch this application. That is the Word instance. The second time onwards, it is going to be super fast. As you can see, the Word application is launched for me. So to set up for that specific user, I can click on sign in just like any other application. Provide the username and password, click next and sign in. All right, so our application is set up for us to use. So now I can open a new blank document or an existing template. After editing it, I have full control on what I can do by like saving it or printing the document. So I'm going to quickly save this document on the local machine and click on save. And if I don't want to use it, I can simply close it. So all of this experience, what you're seeing is via a web browser. Now let's go and do the second exercise. The second exercise is to access the published desktop. To access the published desktop, again, you go to all resources and this time you double tap on this session desktop and click on allow. Again, you have an option to select, do you want to allow clipboard, microphone or printer? Provide the username and password and click on submit. Now it is logging in into the session desktop. So this is the desktop which is assigned to that particular user. I can use it just like any other device. So I can go to my start page, go to my file explorer and click on documents. This is the document we saved via the browser experience. I can just launch it. This time, instead of launching via web browser, we are using the FAT client itself. So this is a regular Windows Word edition and I am using it within a Windows 10 virtual machine. So this is the document we edited and I'm going to modify the file and I'm going to close it and save that file. So that's a quick example on how you can use it. So while this is happening, let me quickly go back to the Azure portal and let's go back to home. Click on Azure Virtual Desktop. On the left hand side under manage, this time click on users. So we haven't used this box to search for a specific user. So I'm going to provide the username. So this is the user we want to test. So I'm going to click on the username. And this is where you would be able to find information for that user related to Azure Virtual Desktop. So you can click on individual assignments to see where all this user is assigned to. There is an application group and a desktop group. Group assignments. What we are interested in is to go and click on sessions. Here you can see the active session for that users. So you as an administrator, if you want to log off this user for whatever reason, or if the user is facing an issue, you can do it by yourself as well. So select the active virtual machine which user is signed in and I'm going to click on log off. So click on log off, or you can do a disconnect as well and click OK. So right now this is logging off this user. So if I go back to the remote desktop page, we will soon see this user will be logged off from this session. It's not refreshed, so my window is stuck. So basically I am logged off. So I can't even use any of this. So it's just a static page. So if I hit refresh, it says that, okay, I'm not able to connect it because session is being logged off for me. Now, if we go back to the Azure portal and click on refresh, or even without refreshing, you can see that the session is being disconnected for that user. So that's the end of lab 4. So we learned about how to publish application and desktop using browser. In Lab 5, we are going to learn how to access the published application and desktop using AVD Desktop Client. So let's go and start our first exercise, which is accessing the published application using the AVD Desktop Client. So let me quickly show you two different scenarios. In the first exercise, I'm going to download this AVD client on a Windows desktop. And in the second exercise, we are going to download this client on a Mac desktop and we are going to use it. We are going to see two different scenarios. So first, download this client on a Windows device. So I'm going to go to the download page and I'm going to download it for a Windows device. So click on download Windows 64-bit and let's install it. So as you can see that in the background, I am using a Windows 11 virtual machine. So what we are doing right now is to install the Microsoft Remote Desktop tool. So click next, install it just for me and just follow the step-by-step process of installing this application. Alright, so the application is installed. So if you can't find this application, all you have to do is I'm going to close this, go to your start menu, and this is the recently installed application, which is Remote Desktop. So I'm going to pin it to my taskbar so we can access it anytime we want, and click on it and launch the application. Use this application for accessing the published application and the published desktop. So first step is to click on subscribe. So provide the username and the password and click on sign in. Alright, so it is automatically signed in. Now I can see all the published application for that user. This app lets you categorize this by a tile version or a list view. You can click on settings to change the look and feel of the application. Use the light mode or a dark mode. I choose the light mode so it's easier for you to see. First, let's try to connect it on a Windows machine. So I'm going to sign in with the username and the password. To launch the session desktop, all you have to do is double tap and provide your password, and that will let you log into your session desktop. So as you can see, this is a Windows 10 machine. I used a Windows 11, so my local machine is Windows 11. Within that, I can seamlessly access a Windows 10 virtual machine. So that's how simple it is. Now let me quickly show you how you can access on a Mac device. So let's go to your App Store in your Mac device and install this Remote Desktop app. And after installing, click on Open. Just like Windows, click on subscribe to this workspace and double tap. Provide the password and click on Connect. And this is how you will launch the desktop or a Remote Desktop session host on a Mac device. Now I am accessing the Windows 10 session host or session desktop on my Mac computer. In Lab 6, we are going to set up FSLogix. Azure Virtual Desktop Service recommends FSLogix profile containers as a user profile solution. FSLogix is designed to roam profiles in remote computing environments such as Azure Virtual Desktop. It stores a complete user profile in a single container, and at the login, the container is dynamically attached to the computing environment using natively supported virtual hard disk and Hyper-V virtual hard disk. The user profile is immediately available and appear in the system exactly like a native user profile. So let me quickly show you how you can set up the whole process. In the first exercise, we are going to create storage account and file share. So let's go and do that. To do that, let's go to our Azure portal. Let's go to the home page. This time on the global search box, search for storage accounts and select that. We do have a couple of storage accounts, but we are going to create a brand new one. So click on create. Retain the default subscription you've been using. I'm going to keep the resource group as the one we created for the host pool. The next step is very important, giving a unique storage account name. So I'm going to call it FSLogix profile storage and a number. Under region, I'm going to pick West US because that's where all of our resources are. If you go back to any of the resources, we have used West US as our resource, so I'm going to retain that. Performance, I'm going to retain standard. Replication, GRS. Click on advanced. We're going to leave all of these values to default and click next to networking. In the networking tab, we're going to enable public access for selected virtual network and IP addresses, and scroll down. Under virtual network, select your hands-on lab virtual network. Under virtual network, we are going to select our AADDS VNet. Scroll down. Under subnet, select the session host subnet and leave the rest of the values to the default. Make sure you select the right endpoints and click on review and create. This will go to a validation process. After that, click on create. Storage account creation will ideally take about a minute or so. Yep, our deployment is complete. So click on go to resource to go to newly created storage account. Under the storage account on the left hand navigation pane, scroll down to data storage. Under that, click on file shares, and under file share, click on Active Directory not configured. Here we have to select Azure Active Directory domain services. Click on setup. To enable this, click on this checkbox which will enable Azure Active Directory domain services for this file share. And after that, click on save. Please note that setting this property implicitly domain joins the storage account with the associated Azure AD domain services deployment. Azure AD domain services authentication over SMB is then enabled for all new and existing file shares in the storage account. So wait for this deployment to complete. Yeah, looks like the deployment is completed. Now let's go back to the storage account. Go to resource, click on file shares. Within the file share, because we don't have any, so click on create a new file share. Here, provide a username. I'm going to put it as user profile. Under tier, select the transaction optimized tier and click on create. Alright, so that process created our first file share for our SMB drive for the user profile. In the next task, we are going to learn how to configure our file share. So let's go and do that. So in this task, we are going to give storage file data SMB share contributor permission to FSLogix container group. So let's go back to your Azure portal, go to your homepage. This time, go to the global search box and type in Azure Active Directory and select your Azure Active Directory. Within your Azure Active Directory, on the left-hand navigation pane, click on Groups. Under Group, we are going to create a new group. So click on New Group. Group type is Security. Group name is Permission for FSLogix container. Under Membership type, just retain as assigned, not dynamic, and click on Create. So our group is successfully created. So after that, hit on refresh. So you would be able to see it over here. Alright, so our new group is visible. So select the newly created group. Within the group page, under Manage, click on Members. So we don't have any members at the moment. So click on Add Members. Under the Add Members tab, you have to search for a user. In my case, I'm going to select myself and click on Select. After that, hit on Refresh. This would take about 30 to 40 seconds. So we can see this user. Now that is been completed. Now let's go back to the storage container. So go back to the home page, click on Storage Accounts and select the storage account you created for the FSLogix. So that is FSLogix Profile Storage. On the left-hand navigation pane, under Data Storage, click on File Share and select the user profile. Within the user profile, click on Access Control IAM and right on the top, click on Add. Within Add, select Add Role Assignment. Under Role Assignment, you have to search for Storage. Under Role Assignment, search for Storage File SMB Share Contributor. So select that. The first one is the SMB Share Contributor and click on Next. Please note that here you can find 3 different share level permissions for these users. And these 3 are Azure built-in roles for granting share level permission to users. So after making the first selection, click on Next and retain Assign Access to User Group and Service Principal and click on Select Members and add the group. So if you remember, we created a group called Permission FSLogix Container. So select that, search for it, select that and click on Select button. And after making these changes, click on Review and Assign and click on Review plus Assign. So this will add the role assignment for that group. Now that exercise is completed, in the next exercise, we're going to configure the session host. So let's go and do that. So let's go back to our Azure homepage. This time, instead of storage account, click on virtual machines. So within the virtual machine, we can see 3 virtual machines. We are only going to concentrate on these 2, the session host 1 and session host 2. So first, let's select the first session host, which is SH0. On the session host page, On the left hand navigation pane, scroll down under operations, click on run command. So select that. Within that, select run PowerShell script. So select run PowerShell script. So I have to run this script. One modification I have to do is to find the name of the storage account. So let's go back to our other Azure portal. Let's go to the storage account and FSLogix profile. So this is the name I'm going to quickly copy and go back to the other portal and replace this with my storage account name. So this script is going to install the FSLogix profile container application and configure the required registries and set the profile container location to the Azure file share we created. The only modification what we have done is to change the name of the storage account. So you would be able to go to the Microsoft documentation and find the appropriate scripts. And I will make sure to put the link and these scripts details on my blog as well. Now, after making the necessary changes, you can click on run. You can see that the script execution is in progress. While that is happening, I just copied the same command and I'm going to go to another Azure portal and we have to execute this in the session host 1 as well. So I'm going to go to portal.azure.com, log in with the same admin username and password, click on virtual machines. This time it is session host 1. Scroll down under operations. We're going to select run command. Within run command, we're going to select run PowerShell script. I'm going to paste the command this time. I copied from the other file. So the storage account name is intact and I'm going to hit on run. All right, so let's go back to the first portal and let's wait for this execution to finish. So we are waiting for the output. The output we should get as script executed successfully. It would take around 5 to 10 minutes for this script to execute completely. All right, so in the first session host, which is SH0, we got the output as script executed successfully. Now let's go to the second virtual machine. I'm going to go to the other portal. So let's see if we can see any execution. Nothing so far. As you can see, after the end of this script, we provided a variable providing after completing all these scripts, we should get a return value as script executed successfully. So let's wait for this output on this session host 1 as well. All right, so our script is executed successfully on both the session host. Now let's go back to the Azure portal. Let's click on Azure homepage. This time go to Azure Virtual Desktop. Under manage, click on users and let's sign off from any logged in session for this particular user. So I'm going to click on this user, go to sessions and select this user and click on log off. So I'm going to log off. Again, from other workspace, I'm going to select this user and click on log off. So that when we do this, the next time when we sign in with the same user, this user should automatically pick up the profile from FSLogix instead of the default one. The other one was the default one. So that's why we are logging off this user before signing into the session. Now let's go to the Windows machine and log into the session host. First, I'm going to launch the remote desktop and click on subscribe, provide the username, password, and click on sign in. And let's double tap the session host desktop, provide the password and click OK. Here, ideally, we should see, as you can see now, it is saying, please wait for the FSLogix app services to be created. So this is setting up the FSLogix for this user for the first time. So this is an indication that the FSLogix is going to be managing the user profile for this user. Now it is applying all the Windows settings. And while that is happening, let me take you to the Azure portal and quickly show you how you can verify the user profile stored in the file share. So on your Azure portal, go to your Azure homepage, click on storage accounts, select the storage account for the user profile. On the left-hand navigation pane, first click on networking. Within the networking tab, select enable all network. This will enable access to your storage account on the public network so that you can see the user profile stored in the file share. So after making the change, make sure to click on save. Now again go back to your storage account. This time on the left hand side under data storage, click on file shares and select the user profile. Here, this is where you would be able to see the user folder created in the file share. So if you open this folder, so double click you will be able to see the user profile data stored in the file share in a .vhd format. So if you don't see it immediately, don't worry. It might take some time for the user profile folder to appear in the file share. So that's the end of Lab 6, which was all about setting up your FSLogix. Now let's start with Lab 7. Lab 7 is load balancing methods. Azure Virtual Desktop support two load balancing methods. Each method determines which session host will host a user session when they connect to a resource in the host pool. When configuring the host pool, we can select the load balancing method. There are two types. One is breadth first and depth first. Breadth first load balancing distribute new user sessions across all available session hosts in the host pool. Depth first load balancing distribute new user session to the available session host with the highest number of connection but has not reached its maximum session limit threshold. So on the first exercise, we're going to add new users to Azure Active Directory. Let's go and do that. Go back to your Azure homepage. On the search box, select Azure Active Directory or type in Azure Active Directory and select Azure Active Directory. Under Manage, click on Users and we are going to create a new user. So click on New User. Under Create User page, create a new user. I'm going to call it ABD User 1. Give a name for the user. I'm going to provide the same as ABD User 1. And domain, we are going to retain our existing domain. And let's click on Create. Now we are going to create another user. This time we are going to create ABD User 2. So provide the name as ABD User 2 and the username is also ABD User 2 and click on Create. Now we have this user created. Let's quickly go and make sure we have these details. So I'm going to quickly copy this username so I don't have to type it. Let's go and find the usernames first. So newly created users. So click on users, click on ABD User 1. I'm going to quickly copy the username. And the other user is just user 2. So I'm just going to modify it and change the value to user 2. So now I have a copy of these two usernames. Now for this user, we have not added any membership. So let's go to this user and on the left hand side, click on groups and click on add membership. Here we're going to add permission. Select the permission FSLogix container and click on select. Do the same for user 2 as well. So I'm going to go back to the user tab, select user 2, go under groups, add membership, type in permission FSLogix container and select and click on refresh. Now let's quickly verify if this membership is visible for all these users. So I'm going to uncheck and let's go to user 1, go to groups. Yeah, we can see the membership added to the user 1. Let's go back to the users tab, uncheck this, go to user 2. Select the user 2 and go to groups. Yeah, we can see that the membership is added. Now let's go back to the home page. This time go to Azure Virtual Desktop. Under Manage, click on Application Groups. You can see that there are two application groups listed here. So I'm going to select the desktop application group now. So select that. Within that application group, under Manage, click on Assignments and click on Add. Here I'm going to select ABD User 1 and ABD User 2 and click on select. Now that we have added the users and I have updated the password for these users, in the next exercise, we are going to change and experience load balancing methods. So let's go and do that. When we created the first host pool, we selected the breadth first. Now let's go and log into the desktop with both user at the same time and see how the user distribution looks like. So I'm going to go to ak.ms web and I'm going to sign in as the first user. The first user is ABD User 1. Click Next, provide the password and click on Sign In. Here we should be able to see the published desktop for the user. And I'm going to double tap and click on Allow. And I'm going to provide the password one more time and click on Submit. Now it is logging into the session desktop using the ABD User 1 user profile. Alright, so now we signed in as user 1. You can see that I have logged into this Windows device as user 1. I'm going to launch another browser. While that is in the background, I'm going to go to ak.ms web and launch this. This time I'm going to try to sign in as user 2. So log in as ABD user 2, click next. Provide the password for the user, click on sign in. So in the background, I used another browser to log in as user 1. This time I'm using a different browser to log in as user 2. I'm going to launch the session desktop, click on allow, provide the password one more time and hit submit. Alright, so I signed into the desktop for the user 2. So to verify that, I'm going to click on start. Go to this user account. As you can see, this is a user 2 desktop, and the other one, if I click on it, this is a user 1 desktop. So now we have signed in to the session desktop using two different browsers as two different user profiles. Now let's go back to our Azure portal. I'm gonna quickly minimize this, and within the Azure portal, go to your Azure Virtual Desktop, click on host pools, select your desktop host pool. On the left hand navigation pane, scroll down under manage, click on session host. Under session host, you can see both are available. What we are interested is to look at these numbers. This shows that how users are distributed among different session hosts under breadth first load balancing method. So the breadth first method first queries session host that allows new connection. And the method then select a session host randomly from half the set of session hosts with the least number of sessions. Now let's go and test the depth first. So before that, we have to log off these users from these sessions. So I'm going to click on these sessions. So first click on the first session, click on users and select the user and click on log off users and click OK. Similarly, I'm going to go back to the second session host, click on the session host, click on users. Under users, select the user and on the top, click on log off users, click OK. And now if you go back to the session host page, after some time hit refresh, you can now see that the active sessions changed to 0. Now to change the load balancing to depth first, what we are going to do is go back to your Azure Virtual Desktop, select your host pool. On the left hand side, scroll down until you find settings. Under settings, click on properties. So select properties. Under properties, on the right hand side, scroll down until you find the load balancing algorithm. So by default, it is set to breadth first. Now we are going to change it to depth first. After making this change, click on save. Now we are going to log into these ABD user 1 and ABD user 2 one more time to see if all the changes are reflecting in the depth first algorithm. So first I'm going to go back to my first browser which I used to log in as ABD user 1. I'm going to cancel it and double tap, click allow, and I'm going to log in as ABD user 1. While that is happening, I'm going to go to another session which is anyway disconnected because we logged off this user. Click on reconnect, allow, provide the password, hit on submit. So now both of these session desktops are logged in, one with user 2 and another one with user 1. So now let's go back to our Azure portal. Within the Azure portal, I'm going to go back to my Azure Virtual Desktop, click on host pools, select the host pool and click on virtual machines. Here you can see both of these session hosts, and under active sessions, you can see session host 1 have 2 active sessions now. In the depth first method, this queries the session host that allows new connection and haven't gone over their maximum session limits. This method then select the session host with the highest number of sessions. If there is a tie, this method selects the first session host in the query. Again, to log off these users, you know the process. Select the session host and click on users, select both of these users and click on log off users, click OK. Alright, so that's the end of lab 7. We learned about load balancing methods. We learned about breadth first and depth first algorithms. In this lab exercise, we are going to learn about cost optimization for Azure Virtual Desktop. So the first exercise is we're going to enable Start Virtual Machine on Connect. So let's go and do that. I'm on my Azure portal. Go to the global search box and type in subscription and select subscriptions and select your subscription. Within the subscription page, click on Access Control IAM, and on the top of the page, click on Add Custom Role. Give a name for your role. I'm going to name it as Start VM on Connect, and make sure you select Start from Scratch and click Next. Under Permissions, add permissions. Here, search for virtual machines. So virtual machines are found under Microsoft Compute. So scroll down until you find Microsoft Compute and select that. From the list of permission under Microsoft Compute, scroll down till you find Microsoft Compute Virtual Machines. So I'm just scrolling down. All right. So I found Microsoft Compute Virtual Machines. Within that, select Read Get Virtual Machine and Other Start Virtual Machines. These are the two options we need to select and click on Add. Then click on Next. Available scope is our subscription and simply click on Review and Create and click on Create. Click OK. Now let's go back to IAM. Click on Add, select Add Role Assignment. Here search for the one which we just now created, which was Start VM. So I'm gonna just search for the custom rule we just created. The one we created is Start VM on Connect. Select that and click on Next. Under Add Members tab, click on Assign to User Access and click on Select Members. Here on the search box, search for Windows Virtual Desktop and select that and click on Select. After that, click on Review and Assign and click on Review Assign. So that's how we need to enable Start Virtual Machine on Connect. Next is Configure Start VM on Connect feature. So let's go and do that. Let's go back to the Azure homepage. Click on Azure Virtual Desktop. On the left hand side, under Manage, click on Host Pools. Select your host pool. On the left hand side, under Settings, click on Properties. On the Properties page, scroll down until you find Start VM on Connect. By default, it will be no, so turn on by selecting Yes and click on Save. Now that we have configured the Start VM on Connect feature, in this exercise, which is the last one, let us go and experience the VM Start on Connect. First, let's go and turn off or shut down the session host. So I'm going to go back to my home page, go to Virtual Machines and select both of these session hosts and click on Stop. So this operation will stop all virtual machines selected below. So we are going to stop both of these virtual machines. So click Yes. Now if you notice, the status of this virtual machine is running and we will wait till this turn to stop before proceeding further. Let's quickly do a refresh. Alright, so both of the status is changed from running to deallocating and this will now change to deallocated. While that is happening, I'm gonna go back to one of the portal and this time I'm gonna quickly reconnect. So I'm gonna connect to the session host, and because our session host is turned off, this would take time, but the idea over here is the cost optimization. So you can keep your session host on a turned off state, and when a user try to connect to a session host, that time the session host will start. So if I move this aside, or let's quickly minimize or change the size of this window, and let's go and hit on refresh here. So ideally we should see our session host, one of the session hosts will turn to running and another one will be stopped and deallocated. So that's what we are waiting to see. You can see that our session host is still not turned on. The first experience is not that great, but in terms of cost saving, yes, definitely there is an advantage of cost saving. While that is happening, I just logged into another portal and this time I initiated from Azure Virtual Desktop user 2 as well. So now we are trying to connect to this session host from two different users, and probably we need to wait for another few more minutes for this to kick in. Alright, so now my virtual machines are asking for password. That means the virtual machines or the session host in the backend is started. So as soon as you provide the password, you would be able to log into your session host. As you can see that definitely there was a time delay between getting these virtual machine to get going because the session host was in a turned off status. So now you can see one of the virtual machine is running. Hopefully soon the other one will kick on as well. Alright, so that's the end of cost optimization lab exercise. In the next lab, we are going to use MEM to enforce MFA while using Azure Virtual Desktop. So in this lab, we will enable multi-factor authentication, and multi-factor authentication is a process where a user is prompted during the sign-in process for an additional form of identification which increases the level of security. The first exercise is set up multi-factor authentication. So let's go and do that. To set up multi-factor authentication, let's go to aka.ms/proofupp, hit enter, sign in with your user account, and here I'm going to select Authenticator app and I'm going to select receive notification for verification and click on setup. And I do have the Authenticator app installed on my phone, so I'm going to launch it and click on add a new user account and scan the QR code. So I'm going to quickly scan the QR code. All right, QR code is entered. So now click next, and I'm going to click next. I'm receiving an approval symbol, so I'm going to click yes to approve the login process. And the second method, I'm going to give the phone number and verify preferred. So I have to verify it one more time and hit verify. All right, so now we set up MFA or the proof of MFA for this particular user. Now let's go back to the Azure portal. Go back to the Azure homepage and click on Azure Active Directory. On the Azure Active Directory page, on the left hand side, scroll down until you find properties and scroll down on the properties page. Towards the bottom, under access management for Azure resources, click on manage security defaults and make sure you select no if it is turned on yes. So, and after that, go back to your Azure AD. This time, instead of properties, click on security, and under security, click on conditional access. Under conditional access, click on new policy, create new policy. Give a name. I'm going to call it AVD MFA. Under assignments, click on user or assignments. Click on select users and group and click on user or group. Here, select the user account, which is your user account, and click on select. Next, click on cloud apps or actions. Select apps. Here, search for Azure Virtual Desktop. Select that and click select. Scroll down under condition, click on conditions. Click on client apps and select yes. Click on done and again scroll down. Click on access controls. Under access control, click on grant. Make sure you select require multi-factor authentication and select. And on the bottom, enable policy, click on on and click on create. This is how you would create a conditional access policy to turn on MFA for a user. Now, let me go back to my local machine. Let's go to Azure Virtual Desktop Session Host Connection page. Provide the username and password for the user and click on sign in. This time it is asking for MFA to connect to your Azure Azure Virtual Desktop workspace. So I have to provide the one-time code. So I'm going to provide 249 and I'm going to hit verify and click yes. All right, so that's how you would be able to connect to your workspace using MFA. So that's the end of that lab. Now the next lab is Microsoft Teams Optimized Experience. In this lab, we will be implementing Microsoft Teams for Azure Virtual Desktop with media optimization. So this supports the calling and meeting functionality. With media optimization for Teams, the remote desktop client handles audio and video locally for Teams calls and meetings. So let's go and set that up. So the first exercise is we're going to configure session host for implementing MS Teams. To do that, let's go to Azure homepage. Here, click on virtual machines. Let's select our first session host, which is SH0. Make sure your status is running. And on the left hand side, under operations, click on run command. Here, we're going to select run PowerShell script. And I'm going to run a command and click on run. So please note that this script is going to download the web RTC and MS Teams, which are specifically meant for Azure Virtual Desktop. So I'm going to do the same step on session host 2 as well. You can see that the operation completed successfully and the script executed successfully on the first session host. So let's go to session host 1, click on run command, run PowerShell script. Ideally, you would have to install this on your second session host as well. But unfortunately, my second virtual machine is not starting. I think it's a backend issue. Because it's a lab environment, I'm not too bothered about it. In the second virtual machine also, you would go to the run command, run the PowerShell script. I'm not able to open it because the power state is non-deterministic because the backend virtual machine is not running. I would have to contact Microsoft support team to fix it. I'm not going to do that, but you get the point, right? So you run this command or you manually install the Microsoft Teams client for Azure Virtual Desktop on your session host. Now, after that step, let's go back to your Azure homepage. Go to your Azure Virtual Desktop, click on host pools, select your host pool. Under settings, this is the important setting. So go to your RDP properties, click on device redirection, and here make sure you enable audio capture from local device and redirection to an audio application. So that's the option you have to select, the first one. Second, audio output location. Make sure you select play sounds on the local computer. And the third one is camera redirection. Here, instead of not configured, click on redirect cameras. After that, click on save. Next, go to your application groups. Select the application groups. Under manage, click on applications and click on add. From the start menu, I'm going to select Microsoft Teams and click on save. Now, if you go back to your workspace and either you have to unsubscribe or I'm going to quickly refresh, I should be able to see MS Teams along with other applications. So now you would be able to launch it. And when you launch it, you will get an option in the settings to redirect your cameras, audio, video, and everything to your local device rather than the session host. So that's how you set up this. In this lab, we are going to learn about how to set up MSIX app attach. So we will be implementing MSIX app attach for Azure Virtual Desktop. MSIX app attach is a way to deliver MSIX application to both physical and virtual machines. However, the MSIX app attach is different from the regular MSIX because it's made especially for Azure Virtual Desktop. MSIX removes the need for repackaging when delivering applications dynamically. So you can go and read about this if you want to know more about it. So first, let's go and learn how to configure Azure Virtual Desktop for MSIX app attach. So I'm going to go back to my Azure homepage. So click on Azure Virtual Desktop. Before that, let's go to Azure homepage. Click on your storage accounts. Select the storage account we created. And under that, let's go to file shares. So we created a file share for user profile. This time we are going to create a file share for MSIX app attach. So click on new file share and name it MSIX file, transaction optimized, and click on create. It creates immediately. It won't take much time. And click on MSIX file and click on upload. Click on upload file. I have made sure that I have uploaded a file for this lab exercise. So I'm going to go to lab files. I'm going to open the MSIX package for 7-zip. So click on upload. So let's click one more. This time click 7-zip, open, and click on upload. Now we created a file share for MSIX and uploaded 2 files. Now on the access control IAM, click on add, click on role assignment, add role assignment. Under the role assignment, search for storage file data, share contributor, select that, click next. Under user, click on add member, and we're going to select a user and click OK. And click on review and assign, and click on review and assign. Now let's go back to the home page. Click on storage account again and search for the storage account, which one we used just now. Go to file shares and select the MSIX file and click on connect. Here, make sure you select the storage account key. And let's copy this file to the clipboard. Now go back to the Azure homepage. Click on virtual machine. Let's go to our session host 0, which is our first session host. Scroll down under operations. Click on run command and run PowerShell script and paste. Looks like it's not copied completely. So let's go back and copy it again. I'm going to go back to the storage account, file share, MSIX file, click on connect, storage account key, and click on copy to the clipboard. Go back to the other Azure portal and paste it. All right. And after that, hit on run. Now we are waiting for the output. The output should be the folder MSIX should attach to this local computer as a Z drive. Again, we should be ideally doing this on session host 1 as well. Unfortunately, our session host 1 is not running. All right. So as you can see that this command is successfully executed. So it is mapped this folder to the local folder. Now let's go back to the storage account one more time. I'm going to go to the other portal. This time close this. Go back to your storage account select the storage account where you created the MSIX, select the file share, select the MSIX file and click on the MSIX cert and select this file URL and click on copy to the clipboard. And now let's go back to the virtual machine. I'm going to go back to the first run command. Here, quickly select this, delete, and paste the new command and hit on run. Now this script should ideally install the certificate for Azure Virtual Desktop Session Host 1. Alright, so we do have to make some more changes in the file. So let's go to Notepad. Alright, so we have to run this second command. So first I have to copy this. So I have to replace this certificate path with the certificate we just copied. I'm going to paste this and copy this entire command. Go back to your Azure portal. This time go back to the run command, delete this and execute this command. So this will make sure the required certificate for this MSIX app will be installed on this session host. We will have to repeat this on session host 1 as well if you have multiple session hosts. So in our case, we are only going to execute in one of these virtual machine. Alright, so now we have configured our AVD for MSIX app attach. In the next exercise, we are going to create MSIX package in AVD environment. To do that, let's go to your Azure environment. Let's go to your home page. Go back to your Azure Virtual Desktop. Click on Host Pools. Select your workspace. Scroll down under Manage. Click on MSIX Packages. Click on Add and provide the URL or UNC path for your MSIX app and click on Add. Let's go and find the path one more time. Click on this 7-zip. Let's copy the storage account name properly. Alright, so click on Add. Alright, so it worked. So last time the storage account name was not correct. So click on Add. So this is how you would add an MSIX app. So to make it active, you have to select it under State. Make sure you click on Active and click on Save again. Now go back to Application Groups. Select the application group ABDAG01. Click on Applications. Click on Add. Here under Application Source, select MSIX package and select the package. Give a name. So I'm going to call 7-zip and click on Save. Now that we have added this, let's go and test it. So I'm going to quickly log into the session host, session desktop and click on Allow. Provide the username and password and log into your session host and go to Start and search for 7-zip. Alright, so it's still not available. So if you don't see that app, I will show you a quick shortcut on how you can find it. So let's click on Start, click on Settings, or go to Search and type in Control Panel. Select the Control Panel, go under View Network Status and Task. Click on Change Advanced Sharing Settings. Click on Turn on Network Discovery and click on Save Changes. Now I'm going to quickly restart the session desktop and click on Restart. Click on Restart anyway. Double tap. Click on Allow. Alright, so you're logging into your session host. Ideally, you should be able to see the 7-zip file now because it's a lab environment. I'm doing it really fast, all of these things. So click on the Start menu. You are able to see the 7-zip file manager. So we have not installed it. It's actually streaming from your Azure. If I go back to the control panel and if I click on uninstall a program, you will not be able to see 7-zip installed here. But you can see that the 7-zip application is running in your local machine. So you can pin it to the task or pin it to the Start menu and you can use that app. To see that how the MSIX app attach is working, I can quickly show you. You can go to Computer Management and click on Computer Management. Under Storage, click on Disk Management. Here you can see that the 7-zip is mounted as a VHD. Similarly, you can see the profile disk is also mounted as a VHD. So that's the end of this lab. Now let's go to the last lab. The last lab is monitoring using Azure Monitor for AVD. Alright, so to monitor the Azure Insights, all you have to do is go to Azure Virtual Desktop and click on Insights. Here you would be able to see different insight for your Azure Virtual Desktop. To view the session host desktop health status, you can expand the session host. Here you can see there are two session hosts and one is available, another one is not available. You can see all of these insights here. Another insight is you can click on these users and you can provide a value for a user. So I selected a user and select a user. Based on the user you choose, you would be able to see different metrics like feed refresh by client version, connection by client and version, key usage numbers, time to connect. A lot of metrics here. These are all really important information for an administrator. Other cool information you can get is the client information. Here you can get information based on how a user is connecting. Are they using a browser or are they using a remote client application? Again, these are all really good insights or meaningful insight for a administrator in your company. Alright, so that's the end of this lab exercise. I hope you found the information provided in this lab helpful. I will see you on the next one. Until then, take care.